Hey folks, welcome to this week's episode of Recruiting Live. My name is Katrina Kibben. I am the managing editor over at Recruiting Daily and the host of this fair show. I'm going to introduce my guest today in just a moment. But first, for anyone who's new to the show, because I recognize a few new names and a few familiar faces, thanks for being here, Carrie, Josh, Tracy. I want to tell you how Recruiting Live works because it's not a webinar. So if you're waiting for the slides, you're in the wrong place. We don't have slides. The purpose of Recruiting Live is that we've created an environment where people can ask anything of people in our industry who are doing the work, who are out there actually, hiring people, coaching people, and so I want you to feel empowered to ask questions and use that question pane. It's very obvious it's questions, and you can type whatever you want in there, and I will be more than happy to make sure that we ask Christopher those questions. And feel free to say hi now. Make sure it's working for you if you want to. Give me a wave. Yes, and we're going to do it the organic way. A nice wave. So, Christopher, why don't you, I know you, right? I think very highly of you. You're one of my favorite people because you are someone that I would say is genuinely good. You have good intent. You operate on the principle of making other people feel really good about themselves, making them feel valued. I'm sure that plays into your success. So why don't you tell people about you and what you do?
Trying early on, Katrina, come on. It's very mutual. And I do try to be genuine. It comes from a place of really in the core believing that we're all unique, right? And we're all special in one way. And my wife and I are getting ready to launch a really cool product. And it's really tied to helping individuals tell their unique story. Cool. And you think about 7 billion people on this planet, but there's only one Katrina Kibben. There's only one you that has your talents and your skills and your abilities, and that needs to be celebrated. So I think when you honor and you respect that, then everything else comes from really a place of wanting to help others shine. So I try to do that. I'm not the best. You can ask my kids. I have 4 boys. They'll be the first to tell you that, Dad's full of crap. But at the same time,
we're not asking them today. We're asking you, and I think.
Oh, yes. They'll tell you the truth, Katrina.
So why don't you tell people a little bit about what you do? Because I think people have heard of peer through, but they might not know exactly what that means and what your day-to-day might look like.
Yeah, so everybody asks, what in the world do you do? So at the core, Steve Jobs has a great quote, and he said, you can only connect the dots looking bad. And for 3 years, I worked for Glassdoor, and I loved it. And one of the things I really noticed when I was working for Glassdoor was the type of reviews that would come in and the data and the information that was there. And I would say like 80% of the negative reviews boiled down to one thing, and it was communication. So when I left Glassdoor, I wanted to help with employer branding, but not with I'm not a real creative person, I'll say that first, but when I say employer branding, I wanted to help from the inside out. So, for example, how you communicate, how you treat your team, all of that rolls up into your employer brand. And the first question I would ask anyone if they call and say, hey, how do we get from 2 stars to 4? My question to any prospect or any client is simply, do you want to improve your stars or do you want to fix the problem? And if you're willing to fix what's going on internally that's causing it, then we're going to be a great fit together. If it's just about getting positive reviews, I can send you Starbucks gift cards. We can do a lot of great things to help get the reviews up.
Right.
But at the end of the day, your people aren't going to go home feeling satisfied. And my mission, if you look at peer through, it's improving people's lives through communication and cohesion at work. And you know this, Katrina, there's this whole, I call it work-life harmony. It's not work-life balance, it's work-life harmony. Yeah. And if you feel valued and respected and appreciated for the work you do, it resonates through your whole life. You go home, you pet the dog, you love your wife, you love your kids, and everything is great. Yeah. And if you go home feeling disrespected or not recognized or unknown or you can't communicate, it also resonates in your life. And it's where we spend so much time. So you go home and, I shouldn't say this because we're both dog lovers, but, you go home and you kick the dog and yell at the kids and life isn't good. And everyone's like, well, you're so unhappy, why don't you get out? And so much of that comes back down to communication tools. And if you have the tools to find harmony, to really respect people's unique purpose and fulfill their purpose at work, you're going to have a phenomenal employer brand. So,
Totally.
yeah.
And I think at the base of that is the most fundamental recruiting tool of all, and that's listening. Actually, I was joking. Someone posted on a Facebook group that they were looking for everyone's favorite favorite recruiting tool. What's your favorite recruiting tool? And I said listening. And Allison McKay actually commented, I can just picture people going off and Googling in the Chrome store, listening.
Yeah, yeah, right. Where's that app? I need to learn how to listen.
Right. And I think that you tell me, is listening one of the things that you find is a consistent challenge in companies?
In companies, in recruiters specifically, I mean, we are on Recruiting Daily, right?
Right.
In companies, absolutely. I mean, I think that's why you look at Glassdoor, and this isn't just a Glassdoor-centric webinar, obviously. I don't mean for that to be, but if you look at the accelerated rate of content on Glassdoor, in the time that we run this webinar, there will be over 300 to maybe 500 pieces of new content that land on Glassdoor.
Wow.
So that could be reviews, it could be salaries, but just in the time that we do this, 300 pieces of information are going to land there. And why is that? It's because I think employees are looking to be heard. They want to be heard. We live in such a fast-paced world now. Information is coming in from so many different directions. I did a workshop yesterday with a company in Salt Lake City, and we were talking about this very thing of, do we really take the time to develop and to listen and to work with our managers to help them work with their frontline? And I was stunned. It was the head of, they call it team member services. That's what they call it. They don't call it HR. HR is a four-letter word in their company. They call it team member services. And her comment was, we don't have the time for that. We work at such a neck break speed that we just don't have the time to do the coaching. And I thought, wow, that's sad, because you're never going to become the company you want to be if you subscribe to the company that you are today. If you just keep doing what you're doing today and you don't have time to really take a pit stop, that concept of slow down to speed up. And so, yeah, listening is a big challenge, and it's hard for managers to, I think, often take the time to really sit down and listen. And there's various forms of listening. It could be communication like we're doing here, verbal or nonverbal, but there's also technology. There's basically 4 supportive styles of listening as well. So how you dress, how you groom, how you show up in the morning. And if you're sensitive to those things, if you're really looking at your employee and you find out that, man, he or she hasn't showered for 4 days, is something going on? Is there problems at home? And if you really pay attention to those things and you respect, again, the individual, you get more out of them, right? You can engage them when they're understood.
Totally. So and I see a lot of people on the line, like Aaron Daniels just came by, thank you, Aaron, and Audra Knight's here. And, these are people who are trying to keep that pulse in the recruiting process of what it's really like to be there, because they recognize, as I'm sure so many of the other people on here do too. Hi, Erica. Thanks for being here. They realize that they have to know what it's like to be on that team and keep a pulse of the company. So what kind of instruction or advice would you give a recruiter who wants to keep that pulse so they can be honest about what it's really like to work there?
Yeah, so one of the tools that I use, and I've used it for 17 years now, I'm kind of dating myself, Katrina, but I use a psychology assessment called DISC, everything DISC. And there's a million out there. I mean, there's birds, there's animals, there's Myers-Briggs, there's all sorts of. Someone wrote the other day, I can't remember who it was, they're like, hey, I'm an elephant. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. I don't know how that fits into your personality style, but rad. And I use DISC, and I use DISC because I've known it for 17 years. I've used it personally, and when I kind of launched into peer through, I was looking for different tools that I could use, because again, it's not just about fixing the ratings and reviews, it's about fixing the problem, the communication problem.
Yeah.
So I just piloted at SRSC DISC for recruiters. And what DISC is, it's obviously it's simple, it's really simple, but it's not simplistic, it's hard to use. But it helps you, like you and I are talking right now, start to read into the verbal or the nonverbal cues that you may pick up from your candidate.
Right.
So we believe in authenticity. We talk about authenticity. I think if we go into any company, we look at, communication, how it starts. Somewhere on the walls is a really awesome mission statement written by high-paid consultants, right?
Or maybe an
That
acronym,
that
a
means
good like
nothing.
watch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, and it's always funny. The real litmus test, by the way, is when you see the acronym and then you go on a Glassdoor and someone says this acronym means nothing here. There is that disconnect. I see that too. But back to that point, if you tune into what your candidate is really looking for, you can be authentic to the candidate. And not all candidates, if you look at some of the reports that have come out, candidates are willing to take a job with a company that has 2.6 stars. They're not looking for all 4-star companies.
Yeah.
But what they really want to know is this company going to resonate with me?
Yeah.
So where I use kind of some of these listening tools is if I'm talking to a candidate and I know that culture is important to them. I go out on social media and I might see they post a lot of pictures of them with friends, or them with work groups, or them with team members. I can pick up really quick that culture is going to be very important for that candidate. So when I talk to that candidate on the phone, that might be what I highlight in my organization. Let's talk about this. If I look on social media and I see, a lot of selfies, for example, or a lot of solo posts, okay, being together with a group, working together in a group, the people aspect may not be as important for that candidate.
Right. Makes
They
sense.
might be more interested in what percent of your sales reps hit plan last month, right? Who's your highest paying sales rep? Can I beat them when I come in?
Yeah.
Who are your DevOps people? What did they code and what did they develop? And can I do the same thing when I get? I don't care about the people. I'm just going to do my.
Exactly.
And understanding that, then you can align what is authentic about your company to that individual. And if they're not going to be fulfilled there, again, coming back to honoring the individual, sometimes it's hard as a recruiter to really say, because the pressure's on us, right? Pressure's on them to put somebody in there, and you've got a hiring manager breathing down your neck. Sometimes it's hard to be really honest and say, I don't know that you're going to be fully fulfilled here, because people are important to you, teamwork's important to you, and we work in silos a lot in this organization. But you're honoring the individual by doing that.
I love that you say that part about honoring, because I do think that pressure can evolve into not honoring the kind of your gut.
Yeah.
And that's actually when I was writing my post about this session, that was what I started to think about, is the familiarity of feelings. How you start to understand and anticipate, like, this is what it means when I feel this. This is what's happening. This is the bigger picture. And I'm sure that you begin a little bit of that emotional and muscle reflex on candidate interactions too, when you're being authentic to who they are and what your company really needs.
Yeah. What tipped me off on this happened a few years ago, and pre-hire assessments are really big right now. We're going to have a candidate go through a pre-hire assessment. We're going to look at the data, and it does to some degree eliminate bias, which is good for that. But exactly what you're talking about, that gut, that comes from the limbic region of our brain. It's the reptile region. It's the oldest region of our brain. It comes from fight or flight. It knows what's right or wrong. There's a really cool meme going out right now that says, trust your inner gut, because can I say bitch on this show?
Yeah.
Because that bitch knows it, right? So I'm quoting the meme. Just
right.
Sorry. Family
you
friendly.
Of all people, I didn't expect that from, but I really appreciate it.
If there's any kids in the background, I'm sorry. Anyway, trust your gut. So, and then what we try to do is we back it up with reason and logic. And where I really got cued into this happened, oh gosh, well, I don't want to say how many years ago, but candidate comes in, and my gut, right, my limbic region is just bing, 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 this is a great candidate, he's going to be phenomenal. And I walk into the hiring manager, and I'm like, you've got to hire this individual, right? It's going to be an all-star. And the hiring manager looks at the profile and says, doesn't have industry experience,
right,
doesn't do this, doesn't do that, and he's like, there's no way I can sign off on this. I'm like, come on, you got to at least give him a shot. And he's like, no, we're not going to do it. Turn him away, and a friend of mine calls, and he's like, hey, I'm desperate for somebody. I've got to hire somebody, and this is another company. And I said, listen, I just turned this candidate away. You should give them a call. Calls him up, hires him. friend calls me 9 months later, and he said, that guy is our top performer. He said, do you have
Always
anyone else
works
you
that
can send
way.
away?
Yeah.
Right? Now, where did I fail, though, Katrina? When I look at that, and again, this comes back to the recruiter and the different personalities you have to work with. You've got to read the candidate, but you also have to read the hiring manager.
Right.
And where I failed with that hiring manager is they're not emotion driven. You know, he wasn't an emotion driven hiring manager. So I'm coming in like all excited and I love this candidate and I'm using words like love and amazing and he's going to knock it out of the park and he's got all, and the hiring manager looking at me like none of what you're saying resonates with me.
Yes.
And had I got in and said, hey, this guy did XYZ, 70%, whatever, it would have been a very different story in terms of selling to that hiring manager. So, bottom line is my friend got a great candidate and I'm happy for him.
Yes. A comment from Jenny. She just said these are great points on culture matches because I think when we talk about culture, so many people think it's fluffy and it's immeasurable and it's so hard to actually create and it has to be organic. I don't know that that's necessarily true.
I love it. You know, there are social cues, and Jenny, you're going to love this. And this isn't mine. I picked it up from somewhere, and I wish I could give credit for it. But you know, there's companies that say we embrace fun, right? We embrace technology. In communication, if you think about it, if I walk into an organization, one of the clients I work with is FEMA, right? Federal organization. So if FEMA were to tell me, hey, we're loose and we're fun and we're fast, I'd be like, you're full of crap. That's not who you are, right?
Right. Exactly.
So when you go into a company, and even for a candidate, if I go in and the mission statement says, you know, we're high tech, we're fast paced, but I walk in there and they're also working on, you know, Commodore 64 computers, there's a disconnect. And this is what I say when you start to pick up on communication. You know, when you walk into a company, if there's no prizes on the desks, if there are no, you know, and you can see this, now you're going to pick up on this when you walk in, you know, what are the pictures on the walls? Are they pictures of team members or are they pictures of customers? Are they quotes from their customers? What kind of computers are they using? Are they the latest in technology or are they still using some of the older computers? And I think I can share this without outing anybody, but I remember in one day I had the chance to go to Google, and in that same afternoon I was at Microsoft, and I was in both of their recruiting departments. And I walked into Google, and you know they've got the arcade set up there, and the carpet's all worn, and they've got the rock band over in the corner, and the guitar's laying on the floor, and it clearly was someone had come in there and used that recently, right? I mean, it smelled like an arcade from the 1980s, to be honest with you.
Which isn't always pleasant, but yeah.
It was bad.
I get it. I can picture it.
But it was used, right? And then I went to Microsoft, and the reason we're talking to Microsoft is they're saying, hey, we're trying to shed our, you know, white collar image. You know, we want to be more hip and more fun. And I walk into their recruiting building, and it's like a lab in there. There's like bright lights, there's white linoleum, and they've got their arcade set up, right? The guitars are stacked neatly in the corner, everything is in order, and I'm looking, I'm like, no one is ever going to walk in here and play Rock Band. It's just not going to happen. You know,
right.
Like everything
you would feel really awkward.
So you can tell me that, hey, we're young and we're hip and we're fun, but I feel like I'm in my grandma's living room when I'm sitting here, and I don't want to touch anything. Right. So yeah, those communications, that's kind of to Jenny's point is, culture-wise, there are those culture cues. Do they have a bean bag just because everyone has bean bags, but nobody actually uses them? You know,
the infamous ping pong table.
Yeah, we have
a ping pong table for a while there.
To use it exactly. You've got to be true to who you are.
Absolutely. So Aaron Daniels wanted to know, what's your letter for the disc?
He has to guess at the end of the show.
Okay. And for Aaron,
I'll send him a gift.
All right, deal. He says, I have an idea. Yeah. He's watching. Awesome. So let's talk about bad reviews on Glassdoor, because I'm confident that if somebody's a recruiter on this line, or even working in EB especially, they've had to deal with I saw really crappy reviews on Glassdoor. Yeah. How do you have that conversation with a recruiter when that's the reality?
Well, I think even more with the recruiter, I think it really comes back to the organization, and I believe in the 1% rule. Katrina. Like if it's gotten bad enough to where somebody feels prompted to take their personal time and write a review, and again, I talk about honoring the person. You
Right.
should honor what they've written. They've taken that time out of their day where they could be doing something else, and they've reached the point where I'm not being heard and I'm going to write a review. And so I really do use the 1% rule. And that 1% says, even if only 1% of it is true, should you listen to it? And I say that because I've had enough experiences now where someone would call and say, can you please just get this review off Glassdoor? And some of them, Katrina, are inflammatory, like sexual harassment, which is really big in the media right now.
Yeah.
We just want this off of Glassdoor. Well, if you're an individual who's ever experienced sexual harassment, why would I ever remove that from there? If I know that it could go, that could happen again. So I did have an experience, organization actually here based out of California, where they had a review on Glassdoor, and it basically said there's a Nazi-style management. And you can imagine what that looks like, print. And I said, we'll look into it. I said, well, will you look into it on your end? That was the challenge to the head of HR that I was talking to. And 5 days later, we got back together, and they said, you know what? I almost lost a team of 9 because of the manager. 9 IT professionals. So for all my IT recruiters who are listening, imagine losing 9 senior DevOps people. What would that have cost you to replace in an organization? And they were literally doing the, hey, I'll go resign today if you come with me, or you go first and then I'll go. It was to that point where they had set a date, and all 9 of them were going to go in and resign on a specific date.
Shoot.
So when we spoke about it, I said, wow, that review saved you a lot of money in turnover, right? And she's like, oh, yeah, I'm so glad we caught it. And then the other question was, what do you think it's already cost you in morale and productivity?
Right.
So coming back to work-life balance, my heart really goes out to those individuals who didn't sleep on Sunday night because they dreaded going to work on Monday, hated the performance reviews,
Right.
would probably go home and pound a couple beers just to make the day go away, versus going home feeling fulfilled and recognized with what they did. So that didn't answer your question at all for a recruiter. How do I address those? I think the best way to address them is to be honest with it.
Yeah.
So if I'm a candidate and I come to you as a recruiter, I said, hey, I read this really negative review, the very best thing you can say is, wow, we really appreciate you taking the time to do some research. No company's perfect, and
Right.
at the end of the day, we're people. We're people dealing with emotions like you talked about. Sometimes emotions get high. Sometimes managers don't perform. But we do our very best to develop our people. Can I tell you about that? So I acknowledge, I respect, I honor what they brought to me, and then I turn it around into conversation.
Totally. Actually, I love that, and I think that there is that honest communication. I've also heard of Citizens Bank, actually. I was talking to one of their heads of recruiting, I believe, and she said, so what she did was she built a team of leaders across all of her major divisions, like one person who was authorized to speak on behalf of her department. So on Glassdoor, if there was a customer service rep who posted about a job, she had a customer service leader who could directly address that versus having one voice that responds to everything. She had that kind of team infrastructure so that not only someone who did the job could give feedback about the job, but that person knew how to implement it in their company, right? Knew how to take it and do something with it versus just having information to have information, or to respond to a post purely because it's there. Check the box, let me grab my standard response and copy paste it into the box, right? So they could do the work too.
Great practice. When I work with companies, we talk about an internal and an external strategy. And part of that internal strategy is we do look at negative reviews. So the internal strategy is, if it's a really negative review, who internally should respond to that? And we kind of set levels, like if it is a sexual harassment, guess what? That should go to the CEO or somebody higher than that.
Right.
Don't hide in the corner. talk about that, but address it internally, right? That should be an internal communication that goes out. If it's a positive review, and I think oftentimes that's kind of the misnomer, Katrina, is when we talk about Glassdoor, we talk about negative reviews, and we kind of slant that way. There's
It's
so
almost
much
like dun
stuff
dun
on there.
dun.
Yes, and so when the good things hit too, same thing. Who internally grabs the good stuff and puts it in the newsletter or throws it out onto, hey, we love this, we feel the same way, thanks for bringing it forward. So that's internally. And PR, internal comms, all those guys, throw it in the newsletter, throw it in a monthly memo, whatever it is. And then same thing, we look at the same thing externally. So when things hit externally, okay, if it's negative, who's going to handle it? Just like you said with Citizens Bank, great strategy. But also, what about the good stuff? Who's going to share the good stuff externally as well? We really appreciate this, awesome review. And you do see now in Twitter, more companies are grabbing the good reviews and they're tweeting them out and saying, here's another positive review about our organization. But it is important to paint both sides, for sure.
Right. Totally. So before we get to the Aaron Daniels prediction on your personality type, because he has submitted his official answer, I want to talk. So I know we have a few people here that obviously are working with hiring managers and hiring teams. What's advice that you would give them on being a leader when it comes to listening? So, if they need to lead an internal conversation, or, what are some pointers that you've seen be successful when it comes to improving listening?
Especially with working with hiring managers, I know one of the biggest challenges that I hear from recruiters is getting time with the hiring manager. And we see that a lot. We say, if you want to be more effective, spend time with your hiring manager. And if I go to the hiring manager and say, hey, can I get 30 minutes? They're busy and they're running their reports and they don't see the value of it.
Yeah.
So one of the tips I would often give is you have to show the hiring manager the financial impact, or, kind of that golden rule, right? How is this really going to impact you if we spend 20, 30 minutes together? And you model that by example of show up with 5 or 6 really great questions kind of prepared for the hiring manager, and not just about the type of candidate. I mean questions about, how do you like your communication? How would you like me to follow up with you with regard to where we're at in the process?
Right.
Do you want me to text you? Should we use Slack? Are we using Yammer? Whatever it is. Because sometimes, well, not sometimes, often, we're all moving in different directions. And I think just kind of level setting, understanding what their communication preference is. And communication, or excuse me, technology is one of the 3 main blocks of communication. You've got verbal, you've got listening, but technology is one of them. Yeah. So same thing with that hiring manager. I would just say, what should we use as a listening tool? So it may be technology driven, or it may be a monthly standing meeting, or whatever it might be to help.
Exactly. Alan said, don't ask for 30 minutes, just walk in, and sometimes you can get an hour, right?
Yeah, it's always tricky to schedule. That's a really good point. I would say, too, same thing for the recruiter. Just like we would with a candidate, stalk your hiring managers.
Oh, yeah.
Cyber stalk your hiring managers and look at how they post. Do they write a lot in the first person? I did this. Look at their LinkedIn profile. If there's a lot of I in there, they're probably, more on the driven side of the DISC profile.
Right.
And if they are, then you can understand their fears too. Their fears are vulnerability. So if I know that, I want to over communicate with that manager.
Right.
If I see a lot of social stuff, if I see a lot of we talk, they're going to be more on the people side, and their limitations are getting things done. So that hiring manager, I may need to really push on a lot to ensure that we're moving the candidate through the process, or that we're getting follow-up, letters back. I see that we're at time.
Totally. All right, so we're at our time, so we'll do the Aaron Daniels prediction. I know, time flies when you're having fun, right? He said you're an S with a high D.
Oh, well, that would be amazing if I was. I'd probably be a lot more successful. I am an IS, actually.
There you go.
Yeah.
So no prizes for Aaron today, but I see we do have a few questions coming in from Alan, so I'm going to make sure and connect you with Alan after this. He is a good friend of mine. Do you know Alan Fleur?
Only through social media.
You two, you're going to be best friends by the time you talk. Believe me, because Alan is amazing. So on that note, I just want to let everyone who know, well, one, Christopher, thank you so, so much for being here.
No,
I feel like
none of mine. I didn't sleep last night, Katrina, and just I've been looking forward to this for weeks. So thank you so much. Thank
you're
you.
being too nice to me.
I love what you do.
Uh,
You're good. You're good people, Katrina.
so for people who are still on the line and tune in every week, because I do get messages like, "Where's Recruiting Live?" We're not having Recruiting Live for the next 2 weeks because I am heading to Ireland next Tuesday, and I don't come back until the following Tuesday. And part of my commitment to my partner is that I am not working on this trip, which means I don't have time to prepare for Recruiting Live. So we'll be back after that. I will have a pint for all of you and post lots of pictures on social media. And again, Christopher, seriously, thank you so much. That was great.
Thank you, Katrina.
Really. So yeah, everyone have an awesome weekend, and we'll see you soon.
Awesome.
Bye.